Good morning, students. So, in the last video of this chapter, the Mughals, I had explained about the system of administration, means how the Mughal administration were run during that time, from the emperor level to the last village level. So, I hope you all are able to understand the number of officials, those who were appointed during that time, and regarding their work. Now in this video we will read about how the Mughals have started the Mansabdari system. So for the starting of Mansabdari system, it was said that it was introduced by Akbar. So let us see what is the what was the Mansabdari system and what comes under this. So basically it was introduced by Akbar. So Mansabdari system, it is an bureaucratic administration of the Mughal, and this means that the government officials were appointed according to the Mansabdari system. So the nobles, those who joined the Mughal service, were enrolled as Mansabdar. So whosoever is going to join the Mughal government or Mughal empire as officials, he or she means will be enrolled as a Mansabdar or the employee of the Mughal empire. So Mansabdar were the officers in the Mughal administration, and the term Mansab is referred to the rank that is held by any person or the bureaucrats. So the Mansab is the rank that is holded by him. So Mansab are whosoever is appointed, the person, those who are qualified, the education or the qualification of the Mughal empire, that person can be considered as a Mansabdar. So these Mansabdars can be appointed on the other various sections, like whether they can appoint as a civil post or as in the military post. It is according to their service, and they are also, their service can be changed from the civil to military. Means that if a person is working in military, his Mansabdar, his duty can be changed from the military to the civil or civil to the military. So this kind of Mansabdari system, or this kind of the officials that were introduced by Akbar, was meant for the run the Mughal empire. So Mughal enrolled the people of all races and all religions into the government job. So it is not like that the Mansabdars can be only from Muslim or the those who belong to the Mughal empire. They can be the part. The all religion people can attempt, and they can also be the Mansabdar. Suppose if a person is wanted to join the royal service or the government job during the Mughal empire, so he had to petition through a noble. He must have to submit the petition or tajweez, means the whole information of that person is going to join the government jobs. So Tajweez was a petition presented by a nobleman to the emperor, recommending that an applicant be recruited as Mansabdar. So there, the qualification that is required to be the Mansabdar, it is decided by the previous nobleman, that person who had considered any person for the post. Suppose the person who wanted to join the Mughal empire or for the government job, that person must contact with the nobles, and noble will recommend to the emperor that the person is eligible the for being the mansabdar or the employee of the government. If the applicant was found suitable for mansab, was granted to him. If the person is suitable, so that person can get the mansab. Higher mansab were given to the princes and Rajput rulers who accepted the suzerainty of the emperor. So mansab is the post, or basically the government job, the highest post have the highest salary and highest rank, and always the highest ranks were given only to the princes, means the prince or the son of the empire basically, emperor basically, and the Rajput rulers, those who accepted the overlordship of the Mughal emperor. So only these persons are eligible to be the highest post of the mansab, means they can get the highest post of mansab and get the highest responsibility in the Mughal empire. The term mansab denotes the rank or position of the Mughal military officer. The higher mansab, the higher salary. So whosoever is there in the mansabdari system, or the person who is the part of the empire, have the highest mansab, get the highest salary, as well as status in the Mughal empire. Status means the symbol of that present that person is eligible to be at that post. So this is the basically the mansabdar or the mansabdari system. So mansab is what? Till what you have to understand, the mansab is a basically a group government job, and whosoever is appointed in the government job were known as mansab. But mansab is decided by his work. Suppose a mansab do whosoever is joined as mansab, if he do good jobs, so his post might be increases. If a mansab is not doing well, his post might be decreases. So how this post is get decreases or increases, on what basis the mansabdari system runs? So that is Jat. The first thing, that the first number they have decided, that is Jat. The initially a single number represented the rank, salary and the size of the contingent of the mansabdar. So whatever the area the area they have covered, means the area that is given to the particular mansab, it was only on the base of the Jat. Means Jat means the rank number. The rank number in the Mughal empire was started from 10 up to 10,000. The rank was started from 10. The lowest rank is 10, and when you achieve something, when you achieve good or achieve good post in the Mughal empire, that rank is increased up to 10,000. So 10,000 mansabs were for the prince of the Mughal empire, the Rajput rulers that I told you earlier. So the Jat is the rank of the mansabdar. Suppose any mansab have 10 Jat. Suppose any mansab have 10 Jat, so he is as the lowest post. He is at the lowest post. And if the Jat is get increased 10, 20, 30, 40, 100, 200, 500, 1000, 2000, so that Jat is represent the post of the mansab. So the mansab is, the higher the mansab, higher the salary and higher the status that I told you. After some time, that rank of mansabdar came to be denoted by two numbers. The Jat is divided, Jat and Savar. Savar is what? Savar is the horseman, the soldiers, those who fight on the horse, or they have the experience of the horse fighting, means they can sit on the horse and they can fight with the enemies. So they are known as Savar. So under any mansab, there are some Sawars, those who are having the highest post. Suppose a Mansabdar with 5,000 Jat. He has started from 10, but after some time he increased his Jat up to 5,000 by doing his work. And under the Jat of 5,000, how many Sawars he have? How many horsemen he have? He had at that time 2,000. If I say 2,000 Sawars were there. So this is the division of, this is the category of the deciding the mansab and his post. I think you are able to understand. If a mansab is of 10 Jat, so he at the lowest. If it is increased by 100,000, so it get the highest post. So if a mansab is about 5,000 Jat and had the 2,000 Sawar, means 2,000 horsemen, so he is at the highest. So if a Sawar rank was higher, the Mansabdar position in the official hierarchy would not be affected. Suppose if two Mansabdar are there, so one Mansabdar having the 5,000 Jat and 2,000 Sawar, and another is having 4,000 Jat and 3,000 Sawars, so his post will not be affected. The post is considered by the Jat only. Person who is having 5,000 Jat is the highest. The person who is having 4,000 Jat is the lowest. The Sawars doesn't matter here. 5,000 Jat have 2,000 Sawar and 4,000 Jat has 3,000 Sawar. It doesn't matter. Always the highest post was counted by the Jat of particular Mansabdar. So his Jat is about 5,000, so he will be considered as the highest. But some exceptions were there. If suppose any Mansabdar is there and he is serving in difficult terrain, means in the difficult areas where his Jat is less, and if he had the more Sawars, so his post must be considered as a higher than the 5,000 or 6,000 Jats. So this is the whole Mansabdari system is there. Okay, the Mansabdari system basically was on the basis of the Jagir. So there is a question for you. There must be question how the Mansabdars get their salary and how they maintain their army. So Mansabdars were given Jagirs by the emperor. So emperor divided his kingdom, and after dividing the kingdom, he made one, two, three, four, like Jagirdars. He made the Jagirdars, he made the Jagirs, and each Jagirs is under the one Mansabdar. Each Jagir, the area what he divided, under the Mansabdar. So Mansabdar's responsibility is like that. He will take care of all the Jagirs and the people, those who are living in the Jagirs. His responsibility is to collect the revenue from there and maintain his army, maintain himself, means get the salary from that, and also to pay the tribute to the Mughal emperor, means his earning from the revenue of that particular Jagir, the Jagir that he get from the Mughal empire. So whatever he will extract from there, whatever he will collect the revenue, he will maintain his army as well as he get the salary from there, and the rest revenue he will give to he had to give to the emperor of the Delhi. So this is the Mansabdar and Jagirdari system. So this system was started by Akbar, and after some time this system was get stopped by his other successor, those who came after the Akbar. Now there is other things that we have to read in this topic is the architecture, language and economy. So first of all, let us begin with the architecture. So architecture is what? Architecture is monuments. Those were built by the Muslim emperors, especially Shah Jahan. because Shah Jahan is the ruler of Mughal Empire who had uh, uh, who has constructed a lot of monuments during his reign. So let us begin the thing that what kind of construction they have done, means what kind of monument they have done, they have made, and also we have to see that the how the building or the monuments what they have made, which kind of technology or which kind of architecture they have used in that. So let us begin. In the 7th and 8th century, Islam spread toward the Spain and India. So this was the time when Islam started spreading its view and faith to the other part of the Makkah. So here in the 8th and 7th century, it came India also, and Islam came to India particularly with merchant traders, holy men and conqueror over a passage of 600 years. Means that when it was started, the in the 6th century, the Islam religion was started in the 6th century. Make it sure the Islam was started in 6th century, and after 6th century, after 600 years, means again 6th century. So near about 1200, yeah, 12th century. So in 12th century, and before that also you have read in Mahmud Ghazni and Muhammad Ghori also. So they have started coming to India in the as a merchant traders, holy man, those who are the holy priest of that particular religion, and the conqueror, those who conquered the India. Although by the 8th century Muslim had begun to construct in Sindh and Gujarat. So the Muslim rulers, those who conquered the current days Afghanistan and Pakistan area, so they have started constructing some of building in the 8th century, but after 13th century on the large scale they have started making the monuments in the Indian subcontinent. The noteworthy aspect of these migrations and conquest was that Muslims absorbed many features of the local culture and tradition and combined them with their own architectural feature. So the important point is that you have to understand the Muslim, those who came to India, they have their own culture and tradition. When they entered in India, they started combining, they started merging both of the tradition and culture with each other. Means the what they have bought from there, means whether they are the Turkic or the Persian, what they have bought from there and what they have seen in India, they have started combining or merging both of the architecture. So in the field of architecture, mix of many structural techniques, stylized shapes and surface decoration came out through constant intervention of acceptance and rejection or modification of the architectural elements. So whatever the development was visible in the monuments of the monuments which were made in the 12th century, 13th century and so on, so that changes were the intervention of acceptance and rejection. Some features they have accepted, some features they have rejected from the Persian, Turkish or Indian. So all three kind of infrastructure or the architecture what they have learned, some point they have accept or some point they have rejected. So these architecture entities or categories showcasing the multiple style known as Indian Saracenic or the Indo-Islamic architecture. So what they have built, they had built during their rule, those architecture or those monuments were considered as the Indo-Islamic architecture, because Indo-Islamic architecture means the India, what the architecture style was present in India, that is India or the Indo and Islamic. So what they have bought from there, whether Persian or Turkic, that architecture is considered as the Indo-Islamic architecture. Also, by the 12th century, India was already familiar with the monumental construction in grandiose setting. So, after 12th century, the grand buildings or grand monuments were started constructing by these foreign invaders or the foreign rulers. Certain techniques and embellishment were prevalent and popular, such as terrabitin. Terrabitin is a kind of architecture or the technology they have used for the constructing of uh, the roof of the particular building. What they do, they use the beam rather than the arches and vaulting. So they use beam for base, basically base for constructing the roof of the monuments. So they use the bracket, multiple pillars for the support of flat roof or the shallow dome. Dome is what? It is the half hemisphere. You can consider it as a half hemisphere, or the if you cut a ball and the shape you get, the half ball shape is the half hemisphere, and that is also the dome. So the dome is constructed by of the using of beam rather than the arches or the vaulting. Means the what earlier it was used, rather than they have started the beam or the base for constructing these things. The arches in the early construction were shaped in wood and stone, and were unable to bear the weight of the domes and the top structure. So previously it was made up of wood or stone, but after they means those infrastructure was unable to bear the weight of dome and the top structure, means they are unable to bear the roof weight of the roof. So after that, the such arches needed to be constructed with the Voussoirs. Voussoirs is a series of interlocking blocks which were fitted with the keystone. Means the small blocks were used to construct those roofs. The small blocks were used to construct those roofs, which was not used earlier, and that was not able to carry the weight of that roof. So they have started the new kind of technology for making the roof. Let's see the Mughal influence that is seen as a cultural contribution, as like the Mughals have started the centralized and imperialistic government which brought together many smaller kingdoms. So Mughals, what they have done, they have adopted the many policies to unite the different rulers of their kingdom. So whether they are Rajputs or whether they are belongs to another community, they have started uniting. They had united the smaller kingdoms. Also, they have the Persian art and culture amalgamated with the Indian art and culture. So Persian art and culture and Indian art and culture get mixed. They have started the new trade routes from Arab to Turkic land, and also they have developed the Mughlai cuisine in the food. The Mughlai food was become famous during the because of the Mughal influence, and Mughal architecture that is found its way into the local Indian architecture most conspicuously in the palaces built by Rajput and Sikh rulers. So whatever the Mughal architecture we have seen, it is the Rajput and Sikh ruler what they have built during their time. That Mughal architecture has took some of the abstract from there, and they have constructed their building. Now what the monuments the different Mughal rulers they have built, let's see some of the abstract of those things, how the Mughals have built all those buildings. First, the topic that I started, the Jahangir, about the Jahangir was half Hindu by blood, because his mother Jodha Bai she was a Rajput princess, and his Jahangir's son Shah Jahan, he was also continued the policy of tolerance and respect of Hindus from his father as well as his grandfather Akbar. So the Mughal Empire as well as Mughal architecture flourished and rose to great heights under the Bening rule, but all this ended abruptly under the last great Mughal, that is the Aurangzeb. So Aurangzeb, whatever the monuments and building that was constructed by Akbar, Jahangir or Shah Jahan, the mixture of the influence of the Indo Islamic architecture that were came into end by the last great Mughal, that is the Aurangzeb, because he do not follow the policy what his ancestors follow. So his ancestors what they followed for the to make the peace to make the peace to the Hindu rulers, the Aurangzeb did not continue that policy. So let us see some of the monuments. Like the first monument was the of the Mughal architecture was the Tomb of Humayun. It is in Delhi, and it was built by his widow Begum. So Begha Begum was there. She built the first Mughal architecture, the Tomb of Humayun in Delhi. Then Akbar had made Agra his seat of power, means the place from there where he ruled, and his architecture reflect the blend of Hindu and Islamic creation. So whatever he built, it was the impact imprints the Hindu and Islamic creation, like Agra Fort. So Agra Fort is made up of red sandstone. It is on the bank of Yamuna River. It was begun in 1565 and complete 1574. The Fatehpur Sikri, he established the Fatehpur Sikri on to give the gratitude to the Sheikh Salim Chishti. So Sheikh Salim Chishti was a great saint, Sufi saint. He gave the he told to the Akbar that Akbar would have three sons who would survive after the sad demise of many children in infancy. So Akbar's children were died at the time of birth, or those child were live 1 to a month. So Sheikh Salim Chishti forecasted, or he asked the Akbar that after this your child will not be died. So for that he had built the Fatehpur Sikri. Fatehpur Sikri was a town planned as the administrative unit consisting public buildings as well as private residence in close proximity. So in the Fatehpur Sikri, whatever the Fatehpur Sikri town was, it is planned, and it is it consists the public building as a private building. Private people also can reside in those areas. And this city is the modest township, means it is consist hall, palaces, office, garden, pleasure resort, bath, mosque, tomb. So there are a lot of things in the Fatehpur Sikri. And this structure is a trabete construction that I had explained, using the beam for the construction of the roof. Or other construction what he had made, that is Buland Darwaza, Panch Mahal, Dargah of Salim Chishti, Diwan-e Khas, Diwan-e Aam, Jodha Bhai Palace, Jama Masjid, Ibadat Khana. There are a lot of construction, lot of building that was built by Akbar. One of them, Diwan-e Khas, it is a complex structure that is also called the Hall of Private Audience. It has a square chamber with 3 opening. Each side has a carved column and had a center supporting magnificent flower shaped capital, means the pillar basically that is supporting all those that hall. Also there is a thorough ventilation. That ventilation was very good because the windows were opposite to each other to cross the air. Charming balcony was there, and other things were there present in the Diwan-e Khas, that it is believed that the central place of the Diwan-e Khas was meant for the emperor. That emperor will sit in the center place, and the minister will sit at the corner or the peripheral of the passes, means the passes or the side by side of the emperor. After the Akbar, Jahangir was there. So Jahangir has also meant a lot of he also constructed a lot of buildings, like he was known for the Shalimar Bagh on the bank of Dal Lake in Kashmir. He built the Akbar tombs as Sikandra near Agra, and Jahangir tomb is at the Shahadra near Lahore. That was built by his wife Noor Mahal. So these were there. That show the Jahangir's building construction. And Shahjahan. So Shahjahan, you have already know that Shahjahan constructed a lot of monument during his rule, like the Taj Mahal, the tomb of his beloved wife Mumtaz Mahal, and the Taj Mahal was built on. It is a square tomb. It is built on raised terrace, raised means elevated platform, and it has a four tall minarets in the corners. Shahjahan also constructed the Khas Mahal, Diwan-e Khas, Moti Masjid, Jama Masjid. He also built Jami Masjid at Agra in the honor of daughter Jahan Ara Begum, Wazir Khan Mosque in Lahore, and now the Aurangzeb built. He do not fond of the constructing building or what his ancestor done with the Hindu Rajputs and the architecture. He did not follow those things, but he built Bibi Ka Maqbara, that is tomb of his wife Begum Rabia Durrani. It seems like Taj Mahal, but he had made with the black marble. So it is said that it is a poor replica of Taj Mahal. It does not look like Taj Mahal. It is just a poor replica of Taj Mahal. So these were the buildings that were constructed by the Mughal Empire during their rule. Now the important thing that we have to understand, that how the Mughal Empire rule, what language they have used for the administration purpose. So the language what they have used in their administration purpose, that was the Persian, because Persian was the dominant and official language of the empire. The language of elite means the people who are prospered in education, they are the most educated person. So the language of elite later evolved into form known as Urdu. So the Persian what they have used in as the administration language, but after some time that Persian was get immersed, and Persian, Turkish and Arabic, that all emerged into a one script, that is the Nastaliq script. Or Nastaliq script was, I told you that the Nastaliq script was a mixture of Persian, Arabic and Turkish language. So these languages mixed up and gave a birth to the new dialect or new language, that is the Urdu. So Urdu become popular in the common people or the subjects of the Mughal Empire. So Urdu become common because the Urdu is a mixture of the Persian, Arabic and Turkic. So this language is widely used by the courtiers or the nobles, those who are living in the Mughal Empire. Also the Persian language is also there, they are using for the writing works was used as a Persian language, but the speaking language is there, the Urdu. So the Urdu what they have developed, the Urdu had it was the Persian, Arabic, Turkic language, mixture of Persian, Arabic and Turkic language. So the vocabulary of the Urdu definitely come from the Persian and Arabic. So Persian and Arabic vocabulary is there in at the large scale, and very less number of words were there of Turkic or Turkey language in the Urdu. And you know very well Hindi, what Hindi we are using. So Hindi vocabulary is came from Sanskrit. You might have heard the Tatsam and Tadbhav in your Hindi classes. So tatsam is what? The word that we are using as it is, and tadbhav is what? That is we are using as the another word. Means the exchange of that word. And also you have heard the name of deshaj, and means the country language, and the videshaj, yani the foreign language. So we the Hindi is influenced by Sanskrit, and Urdu is get influenced by the Persian, Arabic, and less amount of Turkic also. So what we are using Hindi nowadays while our talking, we also use not only Hindi, we also use some of the terms of Urdu as well, because Urdu was emerged from the Mughal period, and people were started that Urdu become the common language for the all, and we had also used the many of the Urdu word while we are talking Hindi to in our maternal language. Okay, now Urdu is the national language of Pakistan, and it is important co-official language of India also. So here you have seen many script that of the government orders that are in the Urdu language. You might have been visited to the many railway station. There you can also see that the name of the name of the stations were written in Hindi, English, and Urdu. So it is for what? Because it is made for that the people, those who are speak Urdu speaking areas also and Hindi speaking area also, they are able to read out those things. Now, why they have chose the Persian language? The question is raised, why they have chose the Persian language? Because Persian language is used by the nobles, scribe. Scribe means the learner, the scholar, the writer, basically the nobles, the writers, and the soldiers, because they are from the Iran. So Iran, they have used the Persian language. That is why the Persian was used broadly or widely. Despite coming from Iran, Persian was not associated with one sect or one community. So it's not like that Persian language is from the Iran. The Persian language came from the Persian language was used in the other part of the Iran also. So this language has high culture, and which Tamurund audaciously wanted to promote. So Tamurund was the successor of Tamur. So they wanted, basically they are talking about the Babur, because Babur was from the paternal side he was from the Tamur, and from his maternal side he was from the Genghis Khan. So the Tamurind were audaciously wanted to promote the Persian language. Means they literally wanted to give the care and attention to the Persian language. So it was the language of Muslim nobility, who were the prime movers of the Mughal Empire. So those who are the helping hand of the Mughal Empire were nobles, and nobles were used to speak the Persian language. It was a language from which Indian in the ruling class were already familiar with. So Mughal were using Persian. Before that also, those who came, the Afghans, those who came in India, they have also used the Persian and Turkic language. So that's why they have chosen the Persian as their court language or the empire language. Now the next influence, that is the contribution of Mughals, that is the economy. So Indian economy during the Mughal period was totally based on the road system and uniform currency. So what the road they have built, because with the help of road the trade get boomed, means the trade get the exact speed to run the country. And uniform currency, if the currency is differ from the other from one place to another, so how they will exchange the product? So they have made the uniform currency in the whole India, the whole empire, and the perfect road system which helped them to make the Indian economy prosperous during their rule. So there are a lot of products what they have manufactured, or the crop they have grown, they, those things were sold to the other part of the world. Means through the trade, these products, what the product they have grown, the farmers or the peasants, what they have grown in their field, what they have, the artisans, what they have made the product, those were famous in the outside of the India and throughout the world. So those things were exported by the emperors, and also they get the money from that, they get the customs from there. Shipbuilding industry. So in India, the shipbuilding industry was so advanced as compared to the European shipbuilding industry. Means it is just similar to the European shipbuilding industry. And this shipbuilding industry is where the many European came to India, and they also purchase Indian ship, and they keep those ships with them. Also, the textile and steel industry, that is also very prosperous during the Mughal period, because these industries were there to give the revenue to the king, and that revenue helped to the make the economy strengthen of that particular ruler. Also, the economy was maintained by the ship that I told you. They have also maintained that small fleet. Fleet is what? It is a group of ship. So group of ship is there, and group of ship was to take the pilgrims to the Makkah. Pilgrim means the person, those who are visiting the pilgrimage, the religious places. So the people, those who are willing to go Makkah, they go with the fleet. Fleet is a group of ship. They are going together in a group. That is the fleet. So a person who is going to Makkah, he must have some expenses, or that expenses is become the revenue of the ruler. Debel is the port for the fleet. Debel is a port for the fleet. Fleet yani that is the group of ship where the people, those who go to the Makkah and come back to the India, that they have to get deboard at the Debel. Debel, it is in South Sindh at that time. Now it is in the Pakistan. Basically, the Sindh is in the Pakistan. So this place was meant for the fleet to unload their materials, what they have bought, or the people, those who came from the Makkah. These fleet were also helped to import the horses. So those horses, those who are the Arab horses, because Arab have the fast or good breed of horses they have. So Arab horses were also imported by the fleet only to the Indian subcontinent. Also, the Mughal maintained the various river fleet of dhows. So dhows is kya? Dhows is it is a kind of boat with have a long flag like structure with that boat. So that dhows is also there in the rivers of the Indian subcontinent. So whatever the river that is under the control of Mughal Empire, where the those were running, and those also have the fleet. Fleet means a group of ships. So group of those were also there, and these those were used for the transport soldiers over the rivers and fought rebels. So if the Mughal Empire heard that if rebellions are there, so with the help of river and with the help of fleet of those, the all soldiers reach over there and they suppress the rebel and come back to their empire. So those were also there, and fleet were also there to enhance the economy of the empire. Okay, there is one more thing that we have to add it, that is the that Mughal had the famous admiral during their rule. So some of them were very famous at the time of Aurangzeb, like Yahya Saleh, Manawwar Khan, and Muhammad Saleh Kambo. So there are many more admirals are there were there during the rule of Mughals, but these were famous during the Aurangzeb. So there is one more important thing that you have to understand: the Janjira fort of Siddhis. So Siddhis is what? Those who came from the African nations. They settled down in the near the Maharashtra, and they've started ruling over there. So these Siddhis, they have created a fort, that is the Janjira fort, and Janjira fort was under them only, and it was protected by Mughals. Though this fort was never captured by any other rulers except the Siddhis, those who ruled over there. So it is always with the Siddhis, those who are ruling over there, but it was get protected by the Mughals. These Siddhi sailors were famous for voyages to China and East African Swahili coast. So these Siddhis were good sailors, and they were also went to the China and East African areas. So the Mughal traders, those who are traders, international traders basically, they go with the Siddhi sailor to the China or the other part of the world. So Siddhi sailors were used for the purpose of trade, and in behalf of that they protect the Siddhis. During that time, the development of cities and towns were also visible, as the towns and cities were not earlier. It was developed on the basis of pilgrims and other, but trade pilgrims and other. But during the Mughal rule, the cities and towns were developed because of the military and political center. Political center is what? Political center where the ruler made his city and started ruling there, or the military camp is there to train the cadres of the military empire, Mughal empire. So the town has started developing in because of them only. The goods which were produced in the Mughal period was the rural areas. So whatever the goods were produced by during the Mughal period, it was came from the rural areas. Okay, the goods which were used by the bureaucracies were also came from the towns, and the uh, the education system of here. So for the education system, Mughals built maktab and madrasa. So maktab is for the youth, those who are young child or the young boy, they go to the maktabs, and those who are kids, they go to the madrasa. So there they read they were taught the Quran and the Islamic law. So they also learned there the Quran and the Islamic law, such as Fatwa Alamgiri in the Persian language. So whatever the education they get in the maktab and madrasa, those all were in the Persian language. Uh, the one more point that you have to understand, that is the Bengal. So Bengal was prosperous region from the Mughal period up to the British seizure. So till the British did not capture the Bengal, till that date Bengal was so prosperous. So during that time, the the whole wealth was hoarded by the elites. So elites is what? The people, those who are educated, and those who are at the good post in the Mughal empire, they have the whole wealth, the whole money they are having with them, and the wages were low. The workers, those who are manual workers are there, for them the salaries were very low, and the slaves, the bonded laborers, basically the bonded laborers were there, they used as a household servants, they work as a household servant to these elite people. There are some religious cult, means the some of the religious saints were there, they took the uh, took voice against these laborers, and because of them only they have asserted some high status to the labor manual laborers. So these are the things, that is the because of the religious people. Nobility was proposed during that Mughal period, prospered during that Mughal period. Prospered means it growth, it's grow very well during the Mughal period. And the in the last topic I had explained about the Mansabdar and Jagirdar. So those were the nobles. So the Rajput and Muslim from the various country can gain the nobility from the emperor. So as I told them, anyone can be the Mansabdar. So those Mansabdar were becoming wealthy because they have started the extracting money from the uh, peasants, basically the farmers, those who are living in those areas, those who are artisan. They have started extracting money and they are becoming wealthy, and wealthy means they are becoming rich and the person, those who have to pay the revenue or the taxes, they are becoming poor. One thing it was seen in the Mughal time after the Akbar and other, the Mughals, the wealthy merchants, those who are living in the coastal town, they pretended to be poor. Why they have pretended to be poor? Because if they are poor, they have not to pay the taxes. So they have not to the pay. They have not paid the taxes. They can make more money. So this being poor or pretending poor is become very common during the Mughal Empire after the Akbar. And the Indian people were the Indian people were so poor during the Mughal Empire, but in comparison to British Raj, they were good in the comparison of the British Raj. These topic you will read in class 8. And it is because of the modern industry which were brought by British led to the deindustrialization India. So whatever the industries, whatever the development that is brought by the British in India, that makes the that force the laborers, those who are doing it manual, and this led to the make the peasants or the artisans jobless. And because of that, in India it was converted into decentralization. In other part of the world it become industrialization, and in India it become deindustrialization. Now the topic is over, and that you have to write that what is Mansabdari system and what is Jat and Sawar in your copy. Thank you, students.